In every courtroom, there's an unspoken line, a boundary between law and emotion, a place where facts stand above feelings, where judgment must be rendered, not based on memories, but on evidence. But sometimes that line blurs. Sometimes justice wears a human face, one you thought you'd never see again. She had walked into that courtroom like she had done every other morning for the past decade. Black robe pressed, gavel ready, emotions locked behind the thick walls of duty. Her name held weight. Her presence demanded respect. In the eyes of the law, she was calm, fair, and unmoved by personal bias, a pillar of authority. And on this day, she expected no different. The docket was full. Charges ranging from petty theft to assault with a deadly weapon. Nothing she hadn't seen before. Her clerk handed her the next file and she gave it a quick glance. Case number 2387B. Defendant, Marcus Hill, male, 32 years old. Multiple priors. Current charge, aggravated assault with intent to harm. She nodded without emotion, signaled the bailiff, and waited for the defendant to be brought in. And then, the moment happened. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. The man was led in, wrists cuffed in front of him, head lowered, a suit that looked like it had been borrowed at the last minute. But it wasn't the handcuffs or the charge that caught her breath. It was his eyes. Those eyes. She'd known them. Not from a mugshot, not from a previous case, but from childhood, from laughter, from innocence. The air in the courtroom seemed to shift. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her fingers stiffened around the gavel. She felt a chill run down her spine, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. Could it be? Her eyes dropped to the file again. Marcus Hill. That name hadn't crossed her mind in decades, not since the days they rode bikes down cracked sidewalks or climbed trees in the park until the streetlights came on. Not since junior high, when they shared secrets about their dreams, their fears, their plans to escape the neighborhood that never promised much. He had been her best friend, her protector, her first understanding of loyalty, and now he stood in front of her, a defendant accused of violence, lost in a system that had taken so many like him before. She tried to steady her breath. This wasn't just another case anymore. This was personal. As the courtroom buzzed around her with shuffling papers and murmured conversations, the judge's mind drifted far away, decades back, to a neighborhood where cracked pavement and broken fences framed the streets of their youth, a place where opportunity was rare, but imagination was endless, where they didn't yet know that life would one day put them on opposite sides of a courtroom. Back then, Marcus wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a threat. He was just a boy, bright-eyed, clever, quick with comebacks, and always first to take the blame when they got caught sneaking into the school kitchen for extra snacks. He'd jump in front of a bully without hesitation. He'd share his lunch when hers went missing. And she admired him. He made her feel safe in a world that didn't always offer that comfort, especially to kids who looked like them. She remembered their dreams vividly. Lying on the hood of an old car, staring up at the sky, they'd talk about becoming something big. She wanted to be a lawyer, then a judge. Marcus? He didn't know what exactly. Maybe a writer, maybe a teacher, something that didn't require standing on corners late at night, but life, as it often does, crept in and divided their paths. Her grades kept her in the library. His kept him out of it. She was pushed toward honors classes. He was pushed into detention. The system began its quiet work, tracking her upward, pulling him downward. It wasn't fair, but it was familiar. She got a scholarship, a full ride. Her family cried tears of joy as they packed her things and sent her off to college. Marcus stood at the curb, hands in his pockets, smiling, saying, thoughtful, "Go change the world, girl. Don't forget about us." She promised she wouldn't, but she did. Not intentionally, not because she stopped caring. Life just moved, and people drifted. They lost touch. Occasionally, she'd wonder what happened to him. Once, she searched for him on social media, but his name didn't turn up. Another time, she heard a neighbor mention he'd been in some trouble, nothing specific, just that he was running with the wrong folks now. Shh. She'd sighed, whispered a prayer, and buried the thought. Now here he was, no longer a memory, but a man in cuffs, and all those years they shared, all those promises, all those laughs, they crashed into her like a wave. She was supposed to uphold the law. But how do you uphold the law when your heart is being torn apart? The trial began with the usual formality. The charges read aloud, the defense and prosecution introduced, the jury watching with cautious curiosity. But for her, the judge, none of it felt usual anymore. Every tick of the clock echoed louder than it should. Every glance toward the defendant's table twisted a knot deeper in her chest. This was no longer a courtroom. It was a reckoning. Marcus didn't say much. He sat still, quiet, shoulders slightly hunched, not in shame, but in weariness. As if he'd already carried a lifetime of disappointment on his back. He didn't ask for special treatment. He didn't act like a victim. He barely looked up. But when he did, when their eyes met for the second time, there was a spark of recognition again. Not a plea, not even sadness, just a silent understanding. A "you remember too, don't you, look?" And she did. She remembered everything. The prosecution painted a cold portrait. Marcus had assaulted a man during a street altercation. A knife was involved. The victim was in critical condition. Witnesses were divided. Some claimed self-defense. Others hinted at aggression. The case wasn't airtight, but it was heavy enough to crush someone without the money or power to fight back. His public defender tried. She raised doubts about the timeline. She questioned motive. She highlighted Marcus's past. Not as a record of crime, but of survival. Jobs lost, evictions, a neighborhood drowning in poverty. But sympathy rarely wins trials. Facts do. And the facts weren't kind to Marcus. Through it all, the judge remained composed. Her face was still, her voice was firm. But inside, a hurricane raged. Every objection, every sustained motion, every evidentiary ruling chipped away at her. Was she guiding the law or betraying her past? Could she be fair, or was she already compromised? Then, a quiet knock at her chamber's door during a short recess. It was the bailiff, holding a folded piece of paper. Hesitant. "It's from the defendant," he said. "He asked if you'd read it. Said you'd understand." Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The handwriting was rough, uneven, the kind that came from someone who hadn't written anything from the heart in years. It read, softly, "If you're the same girl from Maple Street, I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I knew you'd become something great. I didn't. I messed up. But don't go soft on me. I trust you. I really do. No one else could have judged me fairer. No one else would have remembered who I used to be." The next day, the air in the courtroom felt heavier, thicker, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Closing arguments began, and while the attorneys spoke with passion, it was the unspoken tension between the bench and the defense table that filled the room with the most weight. The prosecutor stood tall, voice steady, confident in the evidence. He painted Marcus as a man with a history of poor decisions, someone who lashed out violently when pushed, who should have known better. His closing line echoed sharply. This is not about his past. It's about accountability for what he did in the present. Then came the defense. The public defender, a woman not much younger than the judge herself, spoke not just with reason, but with heart. She spoke of neighborhoods without hope, of young boys born into survival instead of safety. She reminded the jury that Marcus hadn't asked for mercy, only fairness, that his silence wasn't guilt, but weariness, that he didn't run, that he stayed, turned himself in, that maybe, just maybe, he was still trying to do right. When she finished, the courtroom was quiet. The judge gave her instructions to the jury, voice clear but hollow, like reading from a script she no longer believed in. And as the jury filed out to deliberate, she stared at her hands, the same hands that once held Marcus's when they were kids, helping him climb trees, passing him notes in class, laughing at jokes no one else understood. The minutes passed like hours. Then the jury returned. She sat taller. Mask back on, robe steady. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" she asked. The foreperson stood. "Yes, Your Honor." A beat. "On the charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. We find the defendant, Marcus Hill, guilty." No outcry. No gasps. Just silence. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. He nodded, just slightly, almost like he expected this. And then something happened that no one else in that courtroom noticed. For the briefest moment, he looked at her again, not with anger, not with fear, with gratitude. And in his eyes, she saw not a criminal, not a case file, not a man in cuffs. She saw the boy who used to walk her home when it got dark. The boy who once told her she could be anything. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything. But the rules didn't allow it, and the robe wouldn't let her. Instead, she raised her gavel and spoke the only words she was allowed. Thoughtful. "Court is adjourned." Marcus turned to be escorted away. He didn't look back again. But she did. She watched until he was out of view. And when the doors closed, so did a chapter of her life she hadn't realized still ached so deep. Weeks passed. The courtroom returned to its rhythm. New cases, new faces, new stories. But something inside her had changed. The gavel still fell. The bench still stood. But she wasn't the same woman who walked into that room before Marcus Hill entered it. Every time she looked down at a file now, she wondered. Thoughtful. What story came before the charges? What pain hid behind these mugshots? The note Marcus had written remained tucked inside her desk drawer. She didn't frame it, didn't show it to anyone. But she read it often. In quiet moments, late at night, when the weight of the law pressed down a little heavier than usual. It wasn't guilt she felt. It wasn't regret. It was something deeper. A haunting awareness that the line between the judged and the judge is thinner than most believe. That a few different decisions, a few more open doors, and their positions could have been reversed. One Friday evening, after a long session, she received a letter. No return address. The envelope was plain, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Thoughtful. "Hey, just wanted you to know, I'm reading again. A lot. They got a small law library here. I'm studying. Might even take that GED. Never thought I'd care about all this courtroom stuff, but funny how life comes around. Thank you. For seeing me. For remembering. I don't blame you. I respect you. Always have." It was signed simply, M. She sat there for a long time, holding the letter in both hands, sobbing. Tears gently sliding down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but from something harder to name. Maybe forgiveness, maybe closure, maybe the quiet relief of knowing that even within concrete walls, hope can still breathe. That day, she made a decision. She launched a mentorship program for at-risk teens, especially those from neighborhoods like hers. She started visiting community centers, speaking to young boys who reminded her of Marcus. And she did it not as a judge, but as a witness, someone who had seen both the heights and the heartbreak of what justice looks like when it forgets who it's meant to serve. Her courtroom remained the same, but the stories she carried within it changed. And maybe that's the real verdict. That justice is not just about punishment. It's about remembrance. And sometimes, remembering who someone used to be is the first step toward helping them become who they were always meant to be.